and scalability engineer at WhatsApp. For a few years in a row, that's introduction meant I will be talking of Erlang clusters, distribution, concurrency, and so on and so forth. I sincerely enjoy that, but my true love is mountains. No wonder I have been planning a long trip to a number of various stands. You know, Kyrgyzstan, Pakistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and so on. That means I was going to spend some time training in the climbing gym, doing outside climbing, and maybe walking local mountains up and down, you know, Mount Shasta, Mount Whitney, and so on. And then eventually I'll go here, and that one is Corona Mountain. Yes, some pun is intended, because wishful thinking that was. No Shasta, no gym, no Corona Mountain, and even outdoor climbing is mostly prohibited. But there is something good about that, because it freed up my weekends, and then I got some time to look back and dust old projects. This is how I actually found a truly exciting but completely forgotten argparse library. Just as name implies, it is designed to parse Unix shell command lines. So other programming have plenty of these libraries. For example, Python has at least 3 that are really good. One is Click, another is docopt, and the argparse. There are a few more, of course. They all provide some level of comfort when it comes to translation from Unix utility argument syntax to Python language. When I started learning Erlang, it came as a surprise. There is no good library for Erlang. There is just not a single built-in one. There are several projects from various developers, mostly with quite limited feature set, and of course they all lack maintenance. Even most popular projects for now, I would probably say it's docopt, but even that one haven't received updates for at least 2 years. So I just couldn't resist temptation, and I built my own library, as it always happens. It is heavily influenced by Python and Python argparse library, to be precise. I consider this to be one, if not the most popular solution. So a parser declaration should look very familiar to those experienced with Python version. However, there is nothing in common between Python code and Erlang code, so it has completely different implementation. It's open sourced, it's published to GitHub, and it's also published to HexPM, and it really takes just a few minutes to spin up an example and try it out. So let the code talk, and let's look at one of the examples available. I will just show you in 5 minutes that it's totally possible to build great CLI in that small amount of time. But first, let's start with a problem. What is a problem? In many cases in Erlang, there are really long and incomprehensible files, say sys.config. Have you ever tried reading those? Say sysconfig for a big release, or maybe rebar3 config of a huge umbrella application. I often find myself running Erlang shell, and then using file consult to read the file, and then using lists key find to look at some keys, and so on. Why don't I just make a tool with some more convenient syntax, so I can specify configuration file name, optional application name, and key names to get? It shouldn't really take longer than 5 to 10 minutes to build one. So let's start with the new project. I am assuming everyone is already familiar with Erlang and rebar3 build tool. If not, then the next talk that's coming from Fred and Tristan is just about Erlang and rebar3 build tool. I encourage you to watch it. Running rebar3 new script, followed by the application name. Oops, sorry, something's wrong. Running rebar3 new script creates that application. And writes down some files. So next step would be to import argparse. For simplicity, Let's just use the latest stable version from HexPM. It is as simple as just changing a single line in rebar config of this new application. My timer says it's, I would say, 10 seconds to do the job, because sometimes I misplace a comma or dot or something. But then to make the result portable, I need to add argparse into list of included applications. And then it's done. You have argparse for your application. Next would be to specify arguments that your command line utility will be actually parsing. So I want my script to take a single positional argument, which is a configuration file name to read. And this is as simple as it actually could be. I just create a function in Erlang that returns a list of arguments. And this argument, the first argument, is a file, which is a configuration file name. Now, I want to add two more keys. One is application with a short of -a, and another one is the key, which is a short of -k. They both have type atom, and I specify unsafe atom conversion for this example, which will make argparse to use atom to list. By default, if you just set atom type, argparse will follow secure coding guidelines supported by Erlang Ecosystem Foundation. And in this case, argparse will use list to existing atom. I actually recommend reading those security coding guidelines, or at least quickly glancing over these. They are easy to find. You can use Google to find EAF security coding guidelines. So now to actual coding. The implementation is really just one line. So all that is necessary is to pass arguments coming from the initial call to argparse. Parser returns an argument map with keys corresponding to parsed values. Here, you see the file that is required, and it must be present in the map, so I can just pattern match it. And then I can consult the file to get the terms, and then I can filter by the app and filter by the key. The filter function actually is 6 small lines of code. I will show it later. And yet one more line to actually print the result. And if I want my utility to print errors and usage information, I just need to add these 3 lines. And now, as I promised, I wanted to show how filter function looks. Yeah, that's very simple. It is just this. If argument map contains a key, filter function returns second element of a tuple, where first element is equal to parsed value. Note that type for both key and app is already an atom, and that saves me extra conversion. So this example is simplified on purpose, and of course it contains a bug. When app command line switch is missing, but key is specified, result will be the same as if app was specified, but key wasn't. Fixing this would add 2 more lines of code, and this will not fit on the slide. So this is conference-driven development, Okay, that's just it. There's nothing else to do. Now we can just go, we go and build it with a simple call to rebar3 escriptize. And then we can just run resulting escript and read the files. For example, we can specify -a profiles parameter, and it will just print what we consider to be some application-specific keys. Was it easy enough? I believe so. But is it really different from any other command line parser that we've seen? No, I wouldn't say so, until and unless we get here, which is a feature set that argparse provides. Unlike many other libraries, it has much richer set. So it closely follows Python argparse. So argparse supports both options and positional arguments, and you can specify short and/or long argument forms which obviously implies that argument is optional. And when these short and long forms are missing, it implies the argument is positional. Boolean flags can be collapsed together. You remember those rm minus rf, or maybe tar minus xvzf. Argparse can do just that. It can also count flags, say, to increase debug logging verbosity. It also handles repeated arguments. It supports override and depend modes. And there is also some heuristics to guess negative numbers from an option that also follows Python conventions. Common argument types, say integer, strings, atom, floating points, they can be automatically converted to those types, and there is some validation available. For example, you can request your integer to fall into some specific range. And for strings, you can specify a regular expression to match. For example, to figure out if this is an email that you just supplied through command line or not an email or something else. But is that all? No. What makes argparse really different from any other library is CLI interface. It's a mini framework for building large-scale applications, combining dozens and even hundreds of commands. I'm sure thousands will also work, but I might have some troubles operating such a huge system. What I want from that CLI framework. First, ability to turn any existing module into CLI. There are heated debates whether it's the right goal to achieve, and there is, of course, a trap. When command line interface is just built on part, it's often an example of horrible user experience, some sort of a beta version. But why do we code beta? Because it's better than nothing. Second, I would expect that framework handles commands from multiple modules, multiple Erlang modules. They should be automatic discovery, so I don't need to register these commands or modules anywhere. And of course, the framework should have a way to request detailed usage and help information. So again, as I said, let's code do the talk. I have an existing module that I implemented a long time ago, and now I just want to expose some functions, not necessarily from this very same module, but at least some logically connected module. So first step I do is I add CLI behavior to my module. And then I write somewhat familiar CLI function. As before, it returns a map where argument key defines positional argument of type float. In addition to that, it also returns commands with names, strings mapped to command declaration. It could be as simple as an empty map. And in this case, CLI will look for a function exported from this very same module, and it's named cosinus. The function must have arity 1 because there is just one argument declared. You see the type of float and the name is in. Handler definition is quite flexible, so you can actually point the handler at a different module. Say sinus function, it just calls math sinus function. And then tangents, it's implemented in place, as you can see. I'm having technical issues with not being able to progress through the presentation. And then the last thing that I would need to add is a command line bootstrap. It's, again, as simple as just adding one single function that just works as a proxy and also specifies a program name. How it all works. When CLI run is invoked, it scans loaded modules for behavior CLI attribute. Then it merges all commands and arguments that were returned by CLI. And then it parses command line and identifies handler to run. And if something wrong happens, it just catches exceptions and prints some error or usage information. Excuse me, there's something really wrong with this setup. CLI supports subcommands and even subcommands hierarchy. It wasn't very obvious, but the example I listed, it actually contained 3 subcommands, an argument I defined only for the parent of those subcommands. It's possible to create a hierarchy where grandchildren inherit all the arguments known since the very root of that family tree. And there are other advanced features that are probably worth mentioning. So first, CLI works with handlers that accept a parsed argument in a map form, just like here, or in positional form, and that means you can reuse your existing functions. When using maps, missing optional arguments are just missing. They aren't in the parsed representation. And if you want to use a positional form, then you would have to specify some default, which will be filled in if there is something that's missing from the command line. It's also possible to limit search for CLI behavior to a smaller subset of modules. And of course, there is a way to validate CLI callback, because sometimes these callbacks return such huge maps that it may not be very easy to read and comprehend it. So if something is misconfigured, or maybe there is a conflicting set of options, it's really easy to understand what's wrong there. It's quite useful for unit testing and integration testing as well. But is there something missing from the picture? Yes, there is some planned work, and since this shelter in place or sit at home situation still continues, I might have enough time to actually do all that. I would say that auto-completion, shell auto-completion could be really handy. And same for help and usage format, it still lacks some features compared to Python argparse, even though it's quite good as it is. But even more important, I see ability to expose CLI of a remote virtual machine through Erlang RPC mechanism. So you can control your server with comfort without being trapped in a remote shell, just using Unix command line utility syntax. And of course, it would be good to have cluster-wide control, so you can make a full-size outage controlling many nodes at once with just one command. Well, I'm probably kidding here, but wouldn't it be nice to have a way to cluster from a single CLI? I think it is. So, and of course, your feedback is appreciated, and also pull requests if you're happy to do that. That is pretty much all. So apart from missing the mountains, what do you think was the most painful and least rewarding part of this work? I would say painting this logo, because now I know what it means, proudly designed by a professional software development. Thanks for watching and listening, and I would be happy to answer your questions now.
So yeah, I think we should give Maxim a big hand. This is really exciting. Finally, we have sort of the bridge the gap between Unix shell and Erlang. It's awesome. So big hand.
Yeah. So the question is that
and now we have a lot of audio coming from everyone. So someone we hear a background. So could I ask to be unmuted? Thank you. Yeah, Q&A or proposals or requests for additional features and development of this awesome tool. I'm looking at the Hoover app, and so far we have, let's see, I'm just gonna see if I can refresh. Seems we have no questions currently. Maybe I can ask a question. So Maxim, what was your biggest insight or learning from so far doing this?
my insight was quite interesting. So what I did first, I looked at the existing libraries to figure out how it's normally done. And it is interesting that there is no single approach. Everyone does something else. I started with just trying to repeat what is there in Python, and then I tried to replicate the algorithm there that uses regular expressions on top of some pre-parsed arguments. And then I just realized in Erlang, it's just not needed. It is a language that is so concise and so simple that it's easier to just implement it in a few lines of code. So that was something I was still learning Erlang at the time when I really did the tool. It just took me a long time to actually open source it, publish it, make it somewhat more usable.
So you're saying that the whole regex thing is just falls out automatically in Erlang. Is that your sort of how I should interpret you?
I would say that Erlang pattern matching provides such a nice interface that I just didn't need regex there.
That's pretty neat. More questions or feature requests or reflections on the talk?
Yes, hi. So this is Jatinder. So this talk, would we have this presentation, because there were a lot of commands in this presentation that I couldn't write down, or is this somewhere on GitHub that somebody can look at later?
Yes, there is a link. I think you can still see the screen that I share, and it points to github.com maxau argparse. There is a section with there is actually a whole doc folder that contains several examples, and I recently added this example that I made specifically for this conference. So you can just go there. You can view the full example, or I believe this presentation and the slides will be shared by Erlang Solutions after the conference finished.
Yeah, I can confirm that. So all the talks are recorded, and the slides and the talks will be made available.
Okay. Second question to that was, did you run a demo session on this, or was it just the presentation?
It's just a presentation, and I didn't do any learning sessions or something like that. It's my personal work that is not even related to the company.
I got it. Thank you so much. Yeah, I understand now. Thanks.
Additional questions or comments or reflections or feature requests? I'm going to refresh and see if there's something on Hua.
I think it's too brand new for folks to ask, because it's just got unveiled, right? So we just have to look at it more and see what we can ask, or we can ask.
No, but I think that's a good point. This is something that you need to interact with and try out.
Yep.
But it's a great effort and a great way to share with the whole community, because over the years there's been some tooling missing when it comes to Erlang and OTP, and I think this is a great addition to the whole ecosystem, to the community. So thank you, Maxim, for
exactly. Yeah, thanks, Maxim. Yeah,
going the extra mile.
Thank you, Eric. And I actually just received some feedback that says, well, that's the first issue of the project. I really like having it.
all right, thank you very much. I'll leave. Thanks.
Thank you, Eric. I guess we can save a couple of minutes now.
Yeah, I'm thinking, I'm going to ask if there's one more question. I'll leave the floor open for one more last question or reflection or feature request? Or
yeah, I have a question.
Shoot, please.
Okay, so so this looks really good. This is something I'm definitely going to use. I was wondering, when you get done with like your client API, how do you deploy it?
You mean client API is the work that I plan to do to
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is the part I haven't really decided yet. That's why I haven't released it yet, because there are two possible options in there. First is when CLI code is embedded into the actual code of a running system. That's one option. And another option that I am considering is to completely detach the CLI service code from the actual system running. And in this case, when CLI Bootstrap module connects to a node that's running within a cluster, it sends an RPC with a function that actually does the job. In this case, there will be no code that is embedded in the production beam. Both approaches have their pros and cons, and I haven't decided which one is better. I may end up with both. So this is something to discuss, and I'm kind of appreciating these discussions. I would love to discuss if you have any ideas or maybe explanations of which way could be more useful.
Yeah, and on that note, I think we could continue this conversation in the community board or in virtual meetups in Hoover. You know, you can create new discussion topics or meetings around this this fantastic tool, for instance. So let the conversation continue. And I think also a reminder to everyone that give Maxim feedback. You know, feedback is always good for the speakers on the talks. There's the Beam quiz that you could take, and you can win some books, programming books on Erlang, OTP, and Beam. And also, please remember to visit our exhibitors and see what they have in their stores and what's going on with the sponsors and vendors and exhibitors that help us bring this conference to you. I would like to also remind you that there's an Ask Me Anything sessions. There's a couple of them now during the coffee break that starts in 1 minute, where you can join either Francesco from the keynote, you know, ask whatever questions to related to the keynote, and also with the talk on Chris Keatley now starting as well. So those are two parallel tracks during the coffee break. But of course, if you want to continue discussing this, you can do that in the Hoover app. So once again, thank you very much for joining the session, and thank you, Maxim, for great work and great contributions to the community, and keep up being awesome. And once again, a big hand to Maxim, and thank you all for coming. Wow.